All right, you guys. So today we're going to be talking about how to take notes with note cards. It is literally one of my favorite things that I get to teach eighth graders. I'm really bummed that we're not in school and we don't get to use this unit. The reason why it's my favorite is because I think that it's such a perfect solution to research note taking. Every student in my class last year was absolutely freaked out when I told them that we were writing a 5-page research paper. And just about every single one of them at the end of the year, when I asked what was your favorite assignment we did this year, almost all of them said it was the research paper and that they couldn't believe how easy it was. And I think that's mostly because of this note card system. So I'm going to use an example essay that I worked on about Jimmy Hoffa. So just so you guys know, all of my examples are going to be about Jimmy Hoffa. If you don't know who Jimmy Hoffa is, he was this union leader who kind of became a politician character in the 60s. He was super famous. He was on TV and on the radio. Like, everybody knew who Jimmy Hoffa was. But he got mixed up with the mafia and one day just completely disappeared off the face of the earth without a trace, with no evidence, no witnesses. Nobody knew where he went. It was just like he disappeared to thin air. He was also the subject of The Irishman, which was a Netflix movie that came out last year. Maybe you guys have seen it. Some people think it's Scorsese's best work. I don't necessarily think that's true, but he was played by Al Pacino in that. So coming into our assignment today, you guys should have come up with 5 subtopics that you're going to be discussing in your research papers. Those are going to be super important. They're not just some like weird little exercise that I had you do. So if you kind of blew them off or if you didn't take them seriously, I'm not mad, but I'm just going to say that you guys should probably go back and reconsider that. Coming up with 5 important subtopics that you want to discuss is really going to make writing your paper a whole ton easier. We'll talk about why in a second. So my 5 subtopics when it comes to Jimmy Hoffa, I want to talk about his early life. So who he was when he was a kid, or when he got married, or just anything before he got famous, basically. Then I want to talk about his union work, which is the legitimate work that he did that made him famous. Then I want to talk about when he started getting associated with organized crime and the mafia. I'm going to then talk about his disappearance, what happened, why it's so crazy and strange and miraculous. And then finally, I'm going to talk about the conspiracy theories that people believe about what happened to Jimmy Hoffa, where his body went, yada, yada, yada. So those are my 5 main subtopics. Now, I'll show you why those are important as we get into note cards. When you find a reliable source, the first step in my note-taking process is that you make what's called a source card. So on that source card, you only have 2 things, and they're so crazy important. The first thing that you have is a letter. You just assign that letter to your source. So this is the first source I found, so I'm going to call it source A. This is source A. The next source I find will be source B. The source after that will be source C. And the next one will be source D. All right, like, don't overthink that. It's just you're coming up with a letter and you're assigning it to that source. So this is my source A. It's my first source. And then on that note card, you need to write down as much information as you need to be able to find that source later. So in this case, my source is an article called Events in the Disappearance of Jimmy Hoffa, and it's from the San Diego Tribune. I wrote that down because later, when I need to go back and cite that source, I can hop over to Google, and if I just search San Diego Tribune, Events in the Disappearance of Jimmy Hoffa, it is my first result. So again, that source card just has enough information for me to find that source when I need to, and it has a letter that I am associating with that source. From there, you're going to take notes. This is an example of a note card. As you can see, there's not a ton on it. These aren't hard, I promise. I promise this is a really, really easy way of taking notes. It's here to make your life easier. It's not here to make your life harder. So on my note card, I have an A, which lines up with the letter on the source card. So when I write an A in the upper right-hand corner of my note card, it means that I got it from source A. Then I have disappearance. That is one of my 5 subtopics. I write that subtopic there because the note that I found is about his disappearance. The note that I found says that he left his Lake Orion home at 1 p.m. on July 30th, 1975. Now, what you'll notice about my note is it's super short and it's super choppy, and there's only one on the card. That's how I want you to do it. I do not, and I'll say it again, I do not want you putting 20 notes on one note card. When I write my notes that short, I can't plagiarize. I don't know exactly what the source said, so I can't go back and rip off that source. I have to make that into a sentence when I write it in my paper. I'm going to have to put it in my own words, and then I can't accidentally plagiarize. So then, when I'm done with that source and I move on to my next one, I'm going to do the exact same thing. I'm going to make a new source card. This source card is source B, because it's the source I found after I found source A. And then I write down exactly enough information for me to go back and find that source later. In this case, I know it's from biography.com. I know it's an article titled What Happened to Jimmy Hoffa. I go to Google, I search biography, what happened to Jimmy Hoffa. Sure enough, it is the second search result from the top when I search that. It's enough for me to find it. It's all that I need to write on that source card. Then I'm going to take notes on that source card. In this case, you'll notice that again, I've got source B. So each note card says source B. And then you'll notice though that the topic that I wrote is a little bit different. The last one was about his disappearance. This one's about early life. That is again one of my 5 topics. So I've got some notes there. I know I said don't take more than one note on a card. These are just points. As long as it'll roll into one sentence, it's okay to include it on a card. It's just me trying to keep things as choppy as they can be so that I can't accidentally rip off the wording of the guy who wrote it. This source C is going to touch on his early life and his union work. The only thing I want you guys to notice on here, source C is from a physical source. It's from a journal. But you'll notice that next to the C that I'm writing on the upper right-hand corner of the cards, I'm putting the page number. So in this case, my first note card came from source C on page 24. My second note card came from source C on page 29. And then again, just got super choppy notes. You'll also notice that this time I got notes on 2 different topics. I have something about his early life, and then I also have something about his union work, both of which came from this source C. So then, here's what makes note cards rule, in my opinion, is that when it comes time to write my essay, I'm going to want to talk about those 5 subtopics in the order that I came up with them, and I'm going to want to talk about all the notes on those topics that I might have gotten from different sources. So you'll see here, I took all my early life notes, and I grouped them together. So all 3 of these note cards are about Jimmy Hoffa's early life, about when he was, before he was famous. But then, when you look over here, you'll notice that the sources aren't the same. So here's what's great about note cards. If you guys were just going through and taking notes in a notebook on things that you found, you would just have a big cluster of notes from your first source and a big cluster of notes from your second source. And you'd have a really hard time, like every time that you were writing a paragraph, you'd have to scan through every single note you wrote, and you'd have to find, all right, so source B had this about his early life. Did source C say anything? And you have to look through all the notes you took from your third source to find one little line. Instead, now when they're on note cards, I can just move them around on the desk. I can outline it. It's so freaking easy. And I'm keeping track of the sources that I marked. So to just reiterate here, step 1, make a source card. Make sure it's enough information for you to find your source later, and make sure that you assign it a letter. Step 2, make a note card. In the top right corner of the note card, make sure that it has the letter that corresponds with the source you got it from. On the top left line, write the topic that your card is about. Take quick, super short notes, and then every time that you finish one point or one sentence, make another note card and do the whole thing over again. So by the time this is done, you might end up with like 100 note cards. That's totally cool. It shouldn't be that hard to make them. It's just as easy to chuck them. You can use what you want. You can leave what you don't. And then finally, just repeat. For every new source, make sure that you're making a new source card, giving it a new letter. No 2 sources should have the same letter. On the note cards from that source, write the new letter and write your subtopic. So here's what I love about note cards. What's so sweet about a note card system. It makes for crazy easy citations. So I think we've done a little bit with this before. You guys can see these. These are called MLA citations or inline citations. You can see as you go through them, they're all from different spots. And again, if you were taking notes in a notebook, you'd have to go through your entire essay and line by line go, okay, where did I get that? It can literally take hours. It can drive you mad. I've had to do it when I've messed up before. It is no bueno. Instead, with these note cards, that line, Jimmy Hoffa was born, James Riddle Hoffa, in Brazil, Indiana, on Valentine's Day, 1913, blah, blah, blah. Right on my note card, I know which source it came from. So when I type that into my essay, I just indicate the source, and then I move on with my life. It can literally save you hours. They're super easy to organize. Like we just talked about, you can have notes on the same topic, but from different sources, and all it's a matter of doing is setting a card down on a table. You don't have to dig through pages and pages and pages of notes that you wrote out and typed up or did whatever. Instead, it's all in one spot. And if you decide, hey, you know what, actually this works better later in the essay, cool, you just grab the card and you set it down on another stack. It's so easy to organize. And then maybe my favorite part about the whole thing is that your paper is basically going to write itself. When you take these notes and you take them in the system, you're going to automatically break things into paragraphs. You're going to automatically cite your sources as you go. You're going to automatically have a good gauge of how long your paper is and how much information you have. Spots where maybe you need to focus and find more information on one subtopic, but you're good on another. And then when you go to write it, you're just going to go through these note cards and you're going to turn them into sentences. And it's already made the paragraphs for you. It's already organized in an order for you. When it comes time to actually write that 5-page paper, it's gonna do itself. You won't. There's no more thinking or planning or stressing on your part. So I hope that all made sense. Again, if you have any questions, please don't hesitate to reach out. I love this. I love note cards. They're my favorite skill that I get to teach to you guys. I use them. I've used them all through high school and into college. They've saved me quite possibly weeks of time in total. So with this, you guys can begin taking notes on your topic. I want you using a note card system. I want you to right now just focus on web sources. Starting next week, we're going to begin looking at databases, which are online platforms that have scanned print materials, things like historical journals and magazine articles, newspapers, all sorts of print resources that you'll be able to read on your computer or on your iPad from your house. And we'll talk about how to use those, how to access them, how to look things up. Please don't hesitate to reach out if any of that didn't make sense or if you have any questions or concerns along the way. My goal for you would be that by Monday, I would hope that you have 15 note cards written. So 15 quick facts on your topic. Again, it's not that much. It's either 5 note cards a day if you do it starting today and you go through Friday, or it's 3 note cards a day if you want to do it over the weekend. And just like with most things in this class, it's so easy for you to stay up on this as long as you're doing 20 minutes to 30 minutes of work a day. But suddenly when you put off a day or two here and a day or two there, before you know it, you have hours and hours of work that you've fallen behind on, and it's really hard to catch up. So yeah, 15 note cards by Monday. Please let me know if you have any questions, and have a good Wednesday, guys.